You've killed them. But did you ever ask why they exist? Winged, chained, beaten, armed with tools they didn't choose. The Misbegotten are everywhere in Elden Ring, and the game never asks you to save them. They're not a mystery. They're not a footnote. They're not hidden in some forgotten corner. They stand in the open, shackled and working, and the world looks straight through them. Here's what the Golden Order doesn't want you to realize. If the system were truly perfect, beings like this wouldn't exist. Not as slaves. Not as labor. Not as something that can be worked until it breaks and then replaced. Their bodies are wrong only by the standards of a law that decided long ago what life was allowed to look like. This is not cruelty at the margins. This is design. You meet them early. Castle Morn, Stormvale, the Weeping Peninsula, winged figures hunched under chains, bestial soldiers thrown into battles they did not choose, creatures treated as if their suffering is background noise, part of the scenery. The game never asks you to save them. It simply shows you how normal their condition is. And that normality is the tell. Because nothing about the Misbegotten suggests accident. They are born. They persist. They organize. They rebel. And every system they exist under knows exactly what they are and exactly how to use them. Think about that for a second. These aren't monsters. They're not corrupted. They're not cursed. They're just born wrong. And that's all it takes. The lie of the Order is not that it failed. It is that it ever claimed to be complete. The Misbegotten are not outside the world's logic. They are its proof. If the Misbegotten were rare, they could be dismissed. If they were hidden, they could be denied. If they were recent, they could be blamed on collapse. But none of that is true. They are everywhere the Order needed bodies. Castles, forges, battlefields, mines. Places where labor is consumed and lives are measured by usefulness. This matters because the Golden Order does not pretend to be cruel. It claims moral authority. It claims cosmic legitimacy. It claims that its hierarchy reflects the natural structure of reality itself. Grace flows downward. Purpose is assigned. Harmony is enforced. In that framework, suffering is not a failure. It is a justification. The Misbegotten expose that logic. They are not punished for crimes. They are not cursed for rebellion. They are born already condemned. Their bodies place them outside the acceptable silhouette of life, and that alone is enough to strip them of rights, names, futures. The world does not debate their status, it simply uses them, and that is the danger. When a system decides that certain forms of life exist only as tools, everything built on that system inherits the rot. Castles defended by the enslaved. Victories paid for with lives that never counted. Stability purchased through permanent exclusion. This is not about whether the Order was harsh. It is about whether it could ever be just. The Misbegotten force that question because their suffering is not an accident of history. It is a requirement. Before the Misbegotten are victims, they are defined. The game does this quietly, without ceremony, through placement, equipment, and the way the world reacts to them. They are not introduced with lore dumps or grand speeches. They are introduced as labor already in progress. They are humanoid, but never allowed to be human. Wings that cannot grant freedom. Horns that mark them as aberrant. Tails, fur, claws. Traits associated with older forms of life that the present world has decided to move past. Nothing about their bodies suggests corruption or decay. They are alive in a complete, functioning sense. What they lack is recognition. You've seen this yourself. The lands between draw hard lines around legitimacy. Some beings are born blessed. Some are tolerated. Some are managed. The Misbegotten fall below all of these categories. They are natural births in a system that only values sanctioned forms of nature. That distinction matters. They are not artificial constructs like the Albinaurics, nor are they cursed remnants like the Omens. They are simply unacceptable. The Golden Order defines life through alignment. Grace is not just power, it is permission. To exist fully, a being must fit the approved pattern. The Misbegotten never do. Their existence is a reminder of what happens when natural variation collides with ideological rigidity. So, the world resolves the contradiction the only way it can. It assigns them roles that do not require dignity. Mining, guard duty, frontline combat, tasks where survival is optional and replacement is easy. The Misbegotten are not enemies by nature. They become enemies when the system leaves them no other position to occupy. The most visible chapter of their story is also the most misunderstood. Castle Morn is often framed as a simple revolt, a sudden outbreak of violence in a place that lost control. But nothing about Morn suggests instability before the uprising. The walls stand, the banners hang, the hierarchy is intact. What breaks is not order, but tolerance. The Misbegotten there are not prisoners of war. They are workers, smiths, porters, fighters pressed into service. Their chains are not hidden, and neither is the expectation that they will die defending a stronghold that was never theirs. When they rise up, they do so with tools they were already carrying. The rebellion is not armed by outside forces. It is supplied by the system itself. At the center of that uprising stands a leonine Misbegotten wielding a blade with a history that predates the revolt. A sword tied to honor, legacy, and lineage, now held by a being the world refuses to recognize as worthy of any of those things. This is not random symbolism. It is a direct inversion. The weapon does not elevate him in the eyes of the world. It simply exposes how hollow the world's standards have become. Elsewhere, the pattern repeats. Misbegotten appear in mines, extracting resources they will never benefit from. In battlefields where their deaths are functionally invisible. In fortifications where they guard wealth they cannot own. Their presence is consistent across regions, which tells us this is not a local custom or a rogue lord's cruelty. It is institutional. Even after open rebellion, nothing changes. There is no reckoning, no reform. The world responds with eradication, not reflection. The survivors are scattered back into the same roles, under the same conditions, as if the uprising proved something other than inevitability. This is the known story, and it is already damning. The Misbegotten are not tragic because they rebel. They are tragic because rebellion is the only language the system leaves them. At a certain point, the Misbegotten stop being a social problem and start becoming an ideological one. Their suffering alone does not condemn the system. What condemns it is the reason that suffering is necessary. The Golden Order does not reject the Misbegotten because they are dangerous. It rejects them because they are irregular. They are born naturally, yet their bodies carry traits associated with an older, less controlled vision of life. Wings, fur, horns, forms that suggest growth without permission. In a world where order is defined by fixed categories, that kind of variation is intolerable. This is where the fracture becomes visible. The order claims to represent reality as it truly is, not as a preference or a policy. It presents hierarchy as natural law. But the Misbegotten reveal that this law is selective. Life is not judged by whether it functions, feels pain, or endures. It is judged by whether it conforms. That distinction turns governance into exclusion. Instead of asking how divergent life can be integrated, the system decides it must be managed. Labor becomes the compromise. The Misbegotten are allowed to exist, but only in roles that reinforce their inferiority. They are useful precisely because they are disposable. Their presence stabilizes the system by absorbing its violence. This is where the responsibility becomes unavoidable. A structure this consistent does not arise accidentally. It reflects decisions made at the highest level, decisions that prioritized coherence over compassion. Queen Marika did not need to personally chain the Misbegotten for their chains to become law. By defining a world where legitimacy was narrow and immutable, she ensured that anything outside it would be pressed downward. The Misbegotten are not an edge case. They are the pressure valve. Without them, the system would be forced to confront its own contradictions. With them, it can pretend harmony exists as long as suffering is concentrated somewhere out of sight. This is the hidden layer of their story. They are not proof that the order was cruel. They are proof that it was incomplete. A vision of perfection that cannot account for natural difference is not broken by rebellion. It is broken by design. Before we part, the Golden Order grows through faith, and this archive is still young. If you'd like to walk alongside it, one quiet gesture is enough. You have my thanks. Sincerely. There is something small you might have noticed. Misbegotten weapons do not fit them. Grips are too straight. Blades are too clean. Many swing arms designed for different bodies with movements that look learned rather than natural. Their fighting style is not instinctive, it is trained. Even their animations betray this. They hesitate between strikes, reset their stance too often, recover like soldiers drilled into obedience rather than creatures acting on impulse. This is not how something fights when it is defending territory. This is how something fights when it has been taught to serve. The Misbegotten were not only enslaved, they were disciplined. The Misbegotten are easy to isolate if you want to. One castle, one rebellion, one kind of body. But the world refuses to let them stay contained. Every time you think you understand their role, they appear somewhere else, doing something else, under the same conditions. They are not tied to a single lord or region. They are not the byproduct of one cruel decision. They surface wherever authority needs labor, without obligation. That repetition is the tell. Systems repeat themselves when they are working as intended. Once you see that, the story stops being about what happened to them and starts being about why the world needs them at all. The Golden Order does not collapse because of the Misbegotten. It stabilizes itself through them. Their exclusion creates the boundaries that keep everything else in place. This is why their rebellion changes nothing. Revolt assumes the system is capable of absorbing dissent. But this system does not absorb difference, it filters it out. The Misbegotten are not meant to be integrated or redeemed. They are meant to remain visible enough to be useful and marginal enough to be ignored. At this point, the question is no longer whether the Misbegotten were treated unfairly. The question is whether a world that requires a permanent underclass to function can ever claim moral authority at all. The Misbegotten are where the Golden Order stops pretending. Every abstraction collapses when confronted with bodies that do not fit the plan but refuse to disappear. They are not a flaw hidden in the margins. They are the load-bearing truth of the system. A perfect order does not need slaves. It does not need categories of life that can be expended without consequence. The moment a society requires beings who can be harmed without destabilizing its moral framework, that society has already chosen hierarchy over justice. The Misbegotten exist because the order needs someone to absorb contradiction, someone to stand between the promise of harmony and the reality of exclusion. This is why their presence is tolerated but never resolved. To grant them dignity would force a rewrite of the world's logic. It would mean admitting that grace is not natural law, but policy. That legitimacy is assigned, not discovered, and that admission would unravel everything built on top of it. The system's answer is silence. No theology addresses them. No reform incorporates them. Their lives are spent reinforcing walls, forging weapons, and dying in wars whose victories erase them from history. Even their rebellions are repurposed as proof that they were always dangerous, never wronged. This is the cost of coherence at any price. The order maintains its shape by narrowing the definition of life until it can be controlled. Anything outside that definition becomes labor, threat, or waste. There is no cruelty in this logic. That is what makes it unbearable. It is clean, efficient, self-justifying. And at the center of this structure stands Queen Marika, not as a villain in chains and whips, but as an architect. By choosing an order that could not expand to include difference, She ensured that beings like the Misbegotten would always be necessary. Their suffering is not collateral damage. It is the foundation. This is why the Order was never whole. It was built to exclude, and exclusion does not heal. It accumulates, it hardens, and eventually it defines everything it touches. Nothing about the Misbegotten is unresolved because the world refuses to resolve it. Their story does not end in revelation or correction. It ends in continuation. The same labor, the same silence, the same assumption that this is simply how things are. That is the true outcome of the Golden Order's design. It does not collapse under scrutiny. It endures by narrowing its moral field until contradiction becomes invisible. The Misbegotten survive not because the world tolerates them, but because it has already decided what they are for. Their suffering is accounted for. Their deaths are budgeted. Their lives are never considered part of the whole. This is why there is no redemptive reading here, no secret virtue waiting to be acknowledged. The system does not misunderstand the Misbegotten. It understands them perfectly. They are the cost of stability, paid over and over again so that everything above them can pretend to be pure. What remains after that realization is not outrage, but clarity. The Golden Order did not fail to live up to its ideals. It lived up to them exactly as designed. A vision of harmony that only functions by deciding in advance who will never belong. The Misbegotten do not need to be explained away. They explain the world back to itself. The Misbegotten do not ask the world to change. They endure it. That is what makes them so dangerous to the story the Golden Order tells about itself. They live, work, fight, and die without ever fitting into the categories meant to explain existence. Their continued presence is a quiet refusal of the idea that harmony can be enforced by narrowing reality. By the time you leave them behind, nothing has been fixed. The castles still stand. The mines still run. The chains may be broken in places, but the logic that forged them remains intact. The world keeps moving, confident in its hierarchies, comfortable with the knowledge that someone else will always carry the weight of contradiction. This is the legacy they leave behind. Not hope, not tragedy, but exposure. They show what happens when order values shape over substance, coherence over compassion, stability over inclusion. A system like that does not shatter all at once. It persists, it calcifies, and it teaches everyone inside it what kind of life is allowed to matter. The Misbegotten are not a side story. They are the measure. And once you see what they were forced to be, the question is no longer whether the Golden Order deserved to fall, but whether any order built this way could ever stand without breaking those beneath it. You've walked past them 100 times. Now you know what they mean.